So, Carol,
Yes.
you've just recently retired as president and CEO of Northeast Georgia Health System after 25 years. How do you feel?
I'm still acclimating.
So, we haven't let you totally retire yet. You are
No.
still serving in an executive advisor role to our new president and CEO, Matt Hanley. So, we
Right.
appreciate you sticking around a little while longer. How does it feel to still be in it, but not as fully in it as you were before?
Several people have asked me that. And I think because I had personally prepared not only myself, but the organization for this transition, it's kind of weird that it's not weird, which is
Right.
a great thing, I think.
Right.
Matt and I have been able to work together prior to him actually being on site. So we've had a chance to get to know each other. So that has helped. And then the preparation, that we did with the board, understanding how the handoff was going to be, that onboarding for Matt to help him be successful, because that was very important to me. And my legacy is that there are things that will continue on. And he is so interested in understanding the history and the culture, which, as you know, is something that I have really poured my heart into over these past 25 plus years.
Yes. Well, that is certainly the legacy that you leave for Northeast Georgia Health System. So let's rewind just a little bit and start at the beginning for our audience that may not know the full story. And I know this is going to be a little different than some of the other presentations that are part of this healthcare summit. I felt like this was a great opportunity for you as a long-standing female leader in the healthcare industry within the health system ecosystem of Georgia. Thought this was a great opportunity for those that are watching today to learn some life lessons from you as a seasoned executive, someone who has seen lots of changes in healthcare over the past several decades, and what wisdom you can impart to those of us that are continuing on into the challenging, uncharted waters of healthcare. But let's start at the beginning. How did you get your start in healthcare?
Well, I am the oldest of three girls. Neither of my parents graduated from high school, so it was really important to me to get a college degree. I was just something, I guess it's being that oldest, you always feel like you're kind of paving the way and trying to prove yourself, new territory. But I loved science. My dad felt that I should go to a trade school. He was an electrician by trade, and he wanted to be sure that I had experience and the ability to be sure that I got a job. So that led us to a compromise of getting a bachelor's degree in medical technology. So I started out as a lab tech, and boy, little did I know what that first baby step was going to lead, because I didn't have a goal or an aspiration to be a CEO. I just wanted to be where I could make a difference, and took advantage of a lot of opportunities. As I look back and have done my life mapping over the years, the individuals that you don't realize in a given moment that are making an impact on your life personally and professionally going forward, you really don't know that until you are able to look in the rearview mirror, as they say.
Right, right. And so you were a lab tech for a little while, but didn't do that for a terribly long time before you moved on to something else,
I
right?
did. That's exactly right. I only did it for like 2 or 3 years. I realized pretty quickly that I had more of an outgoing kind of extrovert personality. Most lab techs, and there's nothing wrong with this, tend to, they come in and they're very focused on detail. And I found that while that was important, my personality was more, I guess, a bit outgoing. So I left after a few years and went and became a pharmaceutical sales rep. I have often joked that I used to sell Maalox, now I take it. But then that led then into some consulting in South Georgia with some small organizations, and then got a wealth of experience on the physician practice management side. I only did it for like 5 years, but I've said I got 25 years of experience in that time frame. and then had the opportunity to come to Northeast Georgia Health System, which was home for Steve and I. And so had really an incredible career just here at Northeast Georgia Health System, from working with the physician side, again, our employed physician group, to being the executive project leader for several development projects, and then ultimately becoming the CEO some 14 plus years ago. So yeah, it's been an incredible career.
Certainly not one that you envisioned at the very start.
No, not at all. People ask, well, how can I do what you've done? I'm like, well, I'm not sure how I did it. But, people often say, well, what has been your career ladder? How do you aspire there? And for me, it was about stepping stones. Opportunities presented themselves. Sometimes it meant taking a different title that may not have looked like it was an advancement. Sometimes it meant taking less money. But each of those afforded me different experiences that have built over on each other. Just staying in one line is not necessarily everybody's path, and it certainly wasn't for me. Healthcare being that path,
Right.
but a lot of different stepping stones inside that.
I know that sometimes people say, and I have said myself in my own career journey, that sometimes just being willing to say yes to the next opportunity is that path forward. But you have an interesting story about a time that you said no, that ended up being the right decision at the time, a job that you were offered. So how do you know when is the right time to just say yes and trust it, and when is the right time to say no?
Well, first of all, you need to be sure that you do look at all the facts, be objective, don't get caught up in the excitement of something. But not to sound cliche, listen to your gut. Looking back on it, when I said no, and it was not an easy no, I knew in my heart that it wasn't the right decision. And as it turned out, a year later, it would have been a disastrous decision.
Right.
One I'm sure that we would have gotten through and have made the best of it. But it really did teach me some very, very valuable lessons.
Right. So listen to your gut.
Listen to your gut for sure. And saying why not, as people give you opportunities and, you think, I don't know how to do that. You just get in there and try. People will give you grace. They typically are offering you an opportunity because they know that you can learn and that you will do a good job. You won't be perfect at it, but it's all about learning and, learning from failures. And people often say, well, tell us about your failures. There are things that I wish that I had done differently, but I don't really call any of those failures because they all ended up proving to advance in some way, shape, or form. And so I think that's important to keep in mind.
They were good learning opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So folks that are watching today that may be thinking about leadership, one thing I have learned through my leadership journey, and I know you have experienced through yours, the higher up you get in an organization, the more likely it is that you're going to be leading an area that you've never worked in and don't have any experience in.
Exactly right.
I know we have a lot of nurses that are watching us today. As nurse leaders, there could be a time that they're in more of an operations role as a leader, and they are leading areas that they don't have really any experience working in. What have you learned through that process, and what are the right tools to employ when you are trying to effectively lead folks that are doing things that that you have no experience in or expertise?
Right. That's probably the most valuable lessons to be learned as you advance and you have greater responsibilities that are broader in scope that involve, because you're right, you can't be the content expert on every single thing. My advice is that if that is a desire and you find yourself in those roles, understand who you are first and foremost. We all have our own leadership styles, our strengths, our opportunities, but recognize of what it takes to become a leader. You're only as good as the people who surround you. And that's one of my biggest lessons when, folks say, well, what do you wish that you had known back at a younger age? really understand what your talents are, where you can grow and develop, and help other people grow and develop. That's the key, because it requires true teamwork. You know how I'm about teamwork, and there's not any one individual that's going to make or break an organization or decision. It is truly a full team effort, and having people that that you trust. Trust is foundational. You can get through anything if you can manage that, and having that transparent, unfiltered dialogue,
Right.
so that you can really get through the challenges and the opportunities as well.
Right. And you have done a great job throughout your career of surrounding yourself with strong leaders, employing strong leaders, and really deferring to those that you lead to be the experts, and not always feeling like you have to have the answer, or you have to be the one to answer the question. Feel like if you're not, if you can't answer all the questions, then you're not the leader you need to be. You have consistently deferred to those around you, and not felt like that was diminishing you as a leader in any regard. And that has been a great lesson I have learned, is that you're by deferring to others as experts doesn't diminish your leadership ability. In fact, I think it enhances it.
Yeah, I've actually had people that have shared that with me as they've observed me in a room or in a board meeting, that I'm not typically the first to speak. I want to hear what everybody else has to say. I can clearly make a decision, but by gathering input from all those around and different perspectives, you're going to come up with the best decision. And so not being intimidated by that, but recognizing that, you know, that's a gift that they are giving you. Trust me, I'm not typically the smartest person in the room. So I think sometimes
many would argue with that, but yes.
I think sometimes people may think, "Whoa, you know, she's just listening to all this." I'm like, "No, I really do need all your help," you know. So that has been an attribute that I do think has been beneficial to me in my leadership.
Well, and it certainly has helped you develop the leaders that you're leading when you allow them the opportunity to present at a board meeting instead of you presenting it, or when a question is asked and you deflect to someone on your team, you are continuing to develop those that you're leading.
Yeah, you know, there are many people, well, I shouldn't say many, but there are people, you know, who feel like they've got to demonstrate that they know it, that they've got it, they've got the answer. But ironically, I have had more comments, compliments from our board leadership and others, because from their perspective, it demonstrates confidence on my part that I do have the confidence in the other teams or teammates, and that they can do the presentations and, you know, engage in the dialogue. So it's interesting how that happens.
And gives them a great opportunity to grow and develop.
Yeah.
So we've talked a good bit about what it takes and maybe some great attributes of being a leader. And those that are watching, thinking about leadership, I think those are great lessons for them to take. But what about what advice do you have for those of us working underneath a leader? What are ways that you have experienced that folks that work for you or that are reporting to you can best support you? What are the ways that those of us that are working with strong leaders, what can we do better to better support them?
Well, again, I go back to that foundational trust. I really count on my team, those reporting to me, to be honest. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me I'm paying you a lot of money to help us make the best decisions. And I won't know everything, and I may have blind spots. And being able to have that debate and dialogue and be in a psychologically safe place, I think that's the biggest thing that you can do when you have a new boss that, you know, you don't know that well and haven't typically worked with. Really spending the time to get to know each other and to establish those expectations. I remember back years ago, I had an advisor who shared with me that when you hire somebody, you need to set your expectations. And I was a little puzzled by that at the time because I'm thinking, surely everybody knows to be honest, to be trustworthy, to show up on time. But boy, I tell you, over the years, I have really come to realize that you do have to be very forthright in what your expectations are.
Hmm.
And on both parties,
Mm-hmm.
side, because some, I guess there are some folks in the world that want to, prove themselves, and their bosses are looking for that. That wasn't true in my case. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
us to come to the best decision, not for any one individual.
Right, right. So sometimes disagreeing with your boss or pushing back on your boss can be daunting.
Yes,
But you're saying that is something you have valued and
yes.
encourage those of us that have bosses to do.
Absolutely. In a respectful way.
Right, right, right.
Doesn't have to be heated by any stretch, but just having a dialogue.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier about you never know who's watching.
Hmm.
And I know you have a great story about a tremendous opportunity you had early in your career because someone was watching you when you didn't
Hmm.
know it.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I was a young medical technologist in Jacksonville, Florida. And Dr. Patterson, who was the chief pathologist, huge mentor of mine. Of course, had just joined the organization. So anyway, I was going to a conference in Atlanta, and he asked me to do this special project while I was there at one of the local hospitals there in Atlanta. I didn't have a clue. I'd never done anything like that. But I'm like, okay, why not? So I did it, came back, reported to him. I wasn't sure. I was nervous as everything. I wasn't sure if I'd really hit the mark or not, but I shared the information. I subsequently left, did the pharmaceutical sales, and about 3 years later, he called me and he said, Carol, we are starting up a new business venture, and I'm looking for a med tech with sales experience. Are you interested? And I said, well, I'm always interested in talking. So I went back. I was actually hired as the first employee of that joint venture business development, which I'm proud to say still exists today. But the important lesson there, though, is he said, do you know why I called you, why I remembered to call you? And I said, no, I really don't. He said, you remember that project I asked you to do back 3 years ago? And I said, yes. He goes, I knew you were nervous. I knew you didn't really know, but you were responsive. You came back and you persevered and plowed through. And that was a huge step in my career because I didn't have a clue and had no experience other than the sales experience for that business venture. And it was an incredible lesson. And I have shared that so many times. You just never know who's watching.
Right.
Any little thing, people are always watching, and it makes an impression on them.
Right. And so that certainly was a lesson of folks watching as you're starting your career. And you have certainly experienced that as well in your CEO role, that people are
Yes.
always watching. What's that like?
That was another lesson, even after all those many years of experience. When I was appointed as the CEO here, I had been the chief operating officer. So I knew a lot of people, but they look at you differently with a different title. Even though I'm still Carol, they do look at you different. And that was a big learning for me, that people are always watching no matter what, and especially when you are in a very visible position.
Right.
It's even broader in scope. But one of the lessons learned as a more senior executive is that people look at you and they respect the position, they respect the role and the authority, and they're counting on you in times of crisis. I know back as the organization has gone through, and of course, how could you have a talk without talking about COVID,
Right.
of course?
Right.
And there were days that we were doing town halls and I was speaking, my voice would break, my stomach was knots, because I wasn't sure, but I knew I really had to show confidence and we can get through this. I can't tell you how many people have made comments to me about that phase in time after the fact of like, we knew that, you didn't have all the answers, but you were there, you were strong for us, and you were persevering, and we wanted to do it because we knew if you can do it, we can do it. And so that is a lesson that, again, I learned early on, but it took on even a bigger meaning as the titles changed and the scope of responsibility changes.
When you needed that lesson most.
Yeah.
They had confidence in your confidence.
Yes.
Or at least the confidence you displayed.
Right.
Even if you didn't feel it inside.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a lesson for folks that are looking to become leaders. And I would arguably say that all people are leaders, even if whether you have management responsibility or not, you're influencing people in what you do day in and day out. So it's not all about how many people report to you.
Right. That's exactly right. So when you think about, you mentioned one of maybe your biggest challenges in your career, we talk about getting through COVID, which was a challenge for all of us. But as you reflect on those challenges, any one particular that stands out, maybe it is COVID, what you learned through that, or other challenges, and what you learned through those in your career.
I think understanding your values, who you are, what you're about, having the confidence, always trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. It won't always be perfect. I unfortunately through some of the, or I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but what I learned through some of those really difficult crises is that there were people that we didn't have a trust level, and that was equal, I should say. And what I realized is you can fold up and give up, or you can step up, persevere, and just push through it. And that's what I did over and over, because during those times of crisis is when the true values are going to show through for an individual as well as an organization. And holding on to that, even when you didn't feel like putting one foot in front of the other some days, is what ended up really that perseverance.
Helped you get through.
Yeah. Continuance in a state of grace until a state of glory is experienced.
I like that. I like that. So you talked about values, and that is certainly one of the legacies that you leave upon this system. And that's actually something you did 12 years ago when you first became CEO. Tell us a little bit about that process, why you felt like it was necessary, what it was, and what we're left with today.
Yeah, coming into the CEO role, having been here for a long time, there was a very rich history, a culture, but it was difficult to be able to relay it in a crisp fashion. You feel it, you know it, but what is it? And we went through that process where we interviewed levels of the organization, from the frontline staff, nutritional services, board members, volunteers, medical staff, all levels of the organization, to really come up with those very crisp 4 core values and what they really mean. And I'm pleased to say today that they're a part of our daily language.
That's right.
We also learned what those accidental values were as well.
Right.
Going through that process, both the values and the accidental values really helped to clarify our decision making and the why. Again, coming back to mission, vision, and values.
Right. And I know that, as we talked about, they are still so strong in our organization. Hear them in everyday language. And we get comments about them from folks that work with us from the outside about how strong they are, the values themselves and the I statements. And so certainly some of the best work I think we've done as an organization that you certainly recognized we needed. We had value statements, like 12 of them, I think, that nobody knew what they were or could recite them. But and I know our board has really clung to those core values and have used them as a guide in decision making, which is exactly what they were intended for.
Right. And there are the values, but I think some of the strongest work that we did was defining what those values mean through our core competencies. Because respectful compassion can mean different things to different people.
Right.
But how you conduct yourself, what we expect in behaviors from every single person that is employed and involved with the organization. And that's very rich work.
Definitely.
That is, I think, meaningful. I've had people share with me that it can be difficult work, to understand all that, but it's helped them not only professionally here at Northeast Georgia, but in their personal lives as
Yeah,
well.
it's great. Well, it's
Yeah.
certainly a guide for all of us in our behavior and what's expected,
Mm-hmm.
and what we value at the
Right.
health system. And I think it helps provide clarity, not only in what the expectations are, but also to help clarify what's not
Mm-hmm.
part of our values,
That's
either
right.
from a decision or sometimes a person.
That's right.
So it does bring strong clarity
Yeah.
when you call it out that well.
Yeah, it's been interesting to me over the years. We know, having been around for a long time, we know what it is. But when new people join the
Mhm.
organization, they talk about how that culture is just palpable.
That's right.
It's something real,
Right.
that is felt.
Yes. Well, and I think it's interesting if we think about maybe talking about that a little bit, especially those so many folks that are watching us that work in healthcare. One thing that was very top of mind for our board as they looked for the person that was going to succeed you as
Mm-hmm.
president and CEO was ensuring that our culture remained strong.
Mm-hmm.
They recognized what a unique and strong culture you had built within our health system, and it was paramount to them that the next leader that came after you make sure that that strong culture remained.
Right.
And it's interesting to talk to folks from other health systems, other healthcare organizations across the country, that they can see a change in culture as
Mm-hmm.
leadership changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was admirable that our board placed such a strong emphasis on that. And I think they have found the right person.
Mm-hmm.
I know you think so.
I do.
And I certainly do as well, that can keep that going. But
Mm-hmm.
just talk a little bit about that from a broad perspective, how cultures change as leaders change.
Oh, gosh.
And how you manage through that.
Yeah, exactly. We know, as the board asked me, what do you feel like we need to look for in the next leader? There's a lot of different experiences out there. And I've shared with them, I said, you're going to get some very impressive resumes, very impressive. This is an incredible health system. We're still independent. And so there's just a lot of things there. But if you don't have that right culture fit, if you have an individual that wants to come in and make a mark for themselves, because it's all about them,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could see culture changing with a snap of a finger. It is something that has to be focused on every day. How you lead, how you depend on a team, helping them to grow. It doesn't mean it's all rosy. It is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, as you well know. It takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
hard work.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of emotion involved in that. But I think that the board did make the right decision and in Matt, and just to see that alignment and culture. And he'll do things differently. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I would do
Mm-hmm.
things differently if I were to remain.
Right.
But it's not what you do necessarily, it's how you do it.
Right.
And how you come to make the right decisions.
Right.
With a lot of input.
Right. For those that are watching us that work in healthcare organizations and maybe you're looking to make a move, how do you determine what the culture of an organization is when you're just going through the interview process?
Oh, that's a great question. I think you have to ask the hard questions. It's interesting because sometimes when we would have candidates coming in to interview for a position and we ask them, well, what about our core values struck you? If they hadn't read the core values, well, they're probably not going to be
strike against them.
Okay, not so much. And don't come back in an email and try to tell me what really connected. So I think it's just acknowledging that there are values.
Mm-hmm.
Some organizations, it could just be about, we want to make a big profit. We want to make a big bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that says things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the values there are probably going to be different than they would be in a nonprofit, in a healthcare organization.
So maybe doing your homework on the organization.
Definitely.
What are their core values? Are they called out on their website?
Correct.
And then hopefully the people you're interviewing with can speak to how they show up in the organization.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
they should if they are strong.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Let's as we think back about over the decades that you've impacted Northeast Georgia Health System, what are you most proud of?
The values, the clarification of the values, and the culture of continuous learning. One of my phrases is be better tomorrow than you are today. And that's not just about how we're improving as an organization, how are we improving as a leader. I am retired and I'm still learning, so it never stops. But that's what I think I'm most proud of, is that that culture continues, that you're never satisfied. And one of the things that has been rewarding to me is to see the team and Matt coming in, and even in a short period of time, knowing that we're building on a foundation that will just move it to the next level. And that was always my vision, was to be able to pass the baton forward to keep the race going.
That's right. And you certainly have done that. As we think about this health summit that is sponsored by the Georgia Commission on Women, I think it's very interesting for the women in our audience to learn from you as a female leader that has made it to the very top of a very large organization. What advice or words of wisdom do you have for female workers, for female leaders? I know that sometimes there can be challenges. Sometimes people experience those, sometimes they don't. But what do you think is unique, or what words of wisdom do you have to pass on to others of us that are leading in the healthcare industry and as females?
I think the biggest lesson or piece of advice that I could share would be something that I candidly would share with anybody. And that is understanding who you are. What are your skills? Understand your profile. There's Myers-Briggs, there's all different kinds of tools. But I wish that I had done that and had that more so early in my career. That would have helped to prepare me rather than kind of jumping in by fire, But I think really understanding that and recognizing what are those skills. And we're all different.
Right.
And it takes a different set of people to come together as a team to be successful. So recognizing your role in a given team and having those, that peer accountability, mentors that will be honest with you and not just kind of make you feel good.
Right.
I've had experiences with senior executives. They've never really been given any kind of constructive coaching, and when they get it, they're like so taken back. Like I'm supposed to be the golden person,
Right.
And so I think that's a gift that you should be able to give to other people, but be able to receive it as well.
Right.
That's just that's so critical. And keeping the balance. Don't feel like, okay, I'm wife, mother, executive. You do have to have balance, and you have to find what that balance is. Make sure that you've got a very supportive partner. You're going to have to make decisions if both of you are professionally driven. There's going to be some give and takes.
That's right.
And especially if you have a family.
Right.
And so always put your priorities in order, and that will give and take. Sometimes I've had to give more. Sometimes Steve's had to give more, but in different ways.
Right.
And having that open dialogue and understanding and partnership is important.
Yeah. So as you look to the future of the healthcare industry, I think you have a little bit interesting perspective now that you're not in the throes of it, and don't necessarily have the pressure of leading this organization forward into the challenges ahead, but you certainly have a good perspective on that. What do you see for the healthcare industry as some of our biggest challenges and maybe biggest opportunities ahead?
As I look back over, and it's weird to say decades, because I still think I'm 35.
We still look 35. So.
But as I look back over the decades, at any point in time, the healthcare industry was going through massive change. We were going to fall apart. It's going to be that way going forward. I do think it is at a much faster pace, of course, with technology, artificial intelligence. The advancement just through research is just exponential. And so I think it's staying current We have a rich healthcare industry here in the states, but there's a lot of opportunities there.
Right.
And being focused, and I also believe that it's very market specific too. Healthcare is close to home, and just being part of a big organization doesn't necessarily help you with healthcare close to home. And that's one of the things that I hope for us in Northeast Georgia, being a little biased there, that we can stay focused on that, because we do have a very unique community, and even in the state of Georgia. And so I think that there's lots of opportunities there, but just staying on that cutting edge, not bleeding edge, and gathering as much input, but making sure that the decisions that are made are applicable to your organization, your community. Don't get caught up in the fads, as they say.
Right. Well, you certainly have seen fads come and go, and some fads come back around.
Yes,
right?
They do. Yes, they do.
Well, Carol, thank you for giving this time to the Georgia Commission on Women and to this Healthcare Summit. I think the life lessons, the professional lessons, the experience and wisdom you have is a gift to those of us that receive it, and I'm pleased that you've shared it with all the folks that have joined us today. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel honored and privileged to be asked. And glad that hopefully I can pay a few nuggets forward with all of this experience. So,
Absolutely.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Carol.